So Gedi Sibony. The first time I talk about Gedi publicly. So bear with me. I'm going to try to do a very thorough job of an art historian. It's not an easy exercise to talk about, for me at least, to talk about Gedi. But I will try to figure out some codes to enter Gedi Sibony's work. I titled this talk, and I took notes, so bear with me when I read, because from time to time I lose myself in my own brain, which is not that big, but it happens. So I titled this talk, so just what is it that makes Gedi Sibony's work so different, so appealing? And I'm stealing, of course, the title from one of the major works by the British artist, Richard Hamilton, who work titled just what is it that makes today's so different and so appealing. One of the major works that for me started a series of aesthetic shifts that we can encompass as under the name pop art. It was in 1956, and it was in London. The reason I like the question is because it's impossible to answer it, and I actually like questions that cannot be answered. Because I think it's a really good way to start the day when you ask yourself, so what is it that's going to make today so different, so appealing? You just need to go to the end of the day to figure out. It's like when you drink. So I think it's William Burroughs who said that. He was saying, it's so sad people who don't drink because they never experience hangover. And there is nothing like an hangover because the day keeps getting better and better. I read about it. I have no idea what he meant. So where to start with Gedi? I was looking at Gedi's work when I was preparing, and looking at Gedi's work beside my Richard Hamilton quote and we say a lute, I stole that from him. I started to think about the Big Bang theory in good English, the Big Bang theory, and I started to realize that I have a problem with the Big Bang theory. I have a problem with the notion that the universe might has expanded from a very primordial and hot and dense initial condition at some finite time in the past and has continued to expand to this very day. Or a theory that describes and explains a general evolution of the universe since that very, very specific instant. And I'm wondering if that's the way it works also with art, that you have a moment where boom, that's it, that's start, and since then it's art, and it's going to be art forever. And I'm not sure about that. It seems a little bit romantic to me, and I'm French. I hate romanticism. It's too German. And sorry, I know there's a German connection in the city. So I think between the Richard Hamilton question about what makes today an art and Gedi's art so appealing and so different, and the Big Bang shenanigans, I believe that these two questions, is the Big Bang relevant? Is Richard Hamilton question relevant? That these two questions, or in between these two questions, who actually that have no answer, these two questions are good justification to actually look at art. You're going to think I'm splitting hair, but we're looking at a Gedi Sibony exhibition here. So I think I'm entitled to split hair from time to time. If I apply this question to Gedi, I have to question, what does constitute a Gedi Sibony's work? When and where does Gedi Sibony's art start? Is that in the studio? Is that in the exhibition? Or is that simply when Gedi or when someone talks about it? The reason for me that it is, I mean, for me it's a fascinating question. You know, you tell me at the end if I bored you to death, but so the reason for me that it is a fascinating question is actually that Gedi's work could be, and I'm going to be the devil advocate a little bit, could be the absolute illustration of what conservative art critique or art commentary would immediately identify as contemporary art. I don't know if it's a bad word, I don't know if it's a good word, just a category. Or it's a kind of art, you know, again, if I'm the devil advocate, that could actually trigger the comment, the very cliche comment, my kid could do it. I actually have not only have a problem with the Big Bang, but I also have a problem with this comment. First, because I think it's totally unfair to hide from ignorance and insecurity behind children. It's not fair to the children, only dictators do that. You might remember the photo of Saddam Hussein years ago during the first Desert Storm war, like surrounded by children. You know, when parents come to museum and surround themselves by their children and say, my children can do it, doesn't work for me. For several reasons, because first, when they say that, they try to imply that the art is horrendous. So, if I'm a kid going to see the Gedi Sibony exhibition, and my father call Paul A and say, this is an absolute scandal, my children can do the work and it's horrendous, if I'm the kid, I don't take it very well. Because I would think that my parents don't have a lot of trust in my creative capacity. And actually, I think kids, there would be a total lack of respect for childhood and youth. And I actually think that kids look at art way better than we do as adults. I think they look at art with no complex, no inhibition. And the way they look at art is often more accurate than the way us, as mature or immature adults, can do. They don't have our certitude. They're not afraid of talking about things they don't understand. They're not afraid not to have the language to talk about projects that they are discovering. And on the top of that, I also think that children see the loopholes behind our rules and our convention. So that's just for my kid can do it. Just want to make things clear here. Stop doing that if you do it. I also think that what would be great is actually if someone say my kid could do it, that's a sign of very good art. And I think the child answer should be, well, my dad could not do it, which is also a sign of great art. Because everything you see behind this wall is actually not easy. And I don't think neither a kid or an adult can do it. It's a bit of a digression, I admit, but I will demonstrate that right now. With Gedi Sibony. I brought some props. Have you seen the show? Okay, so. It's a cheap bag, I'm sorry. I work for non-for-profit. Not against profit. So. I'm so happy Gedi is not in the room. Because I'm wireless, so let's go crazy. Okay. So why is this not a Gedi Sibony? You know, I'm not more, I mean, I'm not stupid. It doesn't work. It has nothing to do with Gedi Sibony. And that's what we're going to try to go through and understand why actually it is not a Gedi Sibony, and that to actually achieve what Gedi does takes artistic commitment. And I'm going to go back to my first experience with Gedi Sibony. And my first experience was, the first time I saw Gedi's work was in 2005 at an exhibition in New York City at PS1 called Greater New York. And it's an exhibition we gather in the exhibition space, I don't know how many artists, but a lot of artists that are known, or not known to me. And usually, and there is another artist from the 2005 Greater New York exhibition here, Tom. And you can go my way. It's a difficult project. And there is a lot of artists there. It's always, when you don't know the artist, it's always very difficult to leave the room and leave the space with, remembering what you've seen. You get like glimpse of things. And I have to say that day at PS1, I left the exhibition with one name in mind, and it was Gedi Sibony. It was the first time I saw the work, and one work which I think is one of the most striking work I have seen to date. This is the work. Are you questioning my judgment? I'm kidding. And when I saw this work, I couldn't take it out of my mind. It's in the exhibition here that Anthony put together. And then I went to see Gedi Sibony. I talked with him a little bit. I get to know the work a little bit. And then a few months after, I saw in a different exhibition another work that I thought was the same, but it was not the same, because there was a third piece of carpet. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's different. And I went to see Gedi, and I said, Gedi, what happened? Why is there a third element to this work? And Gedi told me, well, that's very simple. I just got a kid. So I had a third person in my life, so I put the third element on the piece of carpet to signify that I have a kid. And I was like scratching my head. I was like, fine. And he told me, what I'm trying to do here is to give a form to an emotion. I'm trying to give a form to bring to my surrounding, to my practice. Try to invent a language where I can actually give a form to a feeling. And I was like, oh, great. That's a lot, okay, emotion now. I'm going to have to deal with artist emotion. We went through modernity, postmodernity, to what? To find an artist who does something interesting, but it has to be emotional. It has to bring something like a human stain. In my pristine understanding of modernity is exactly what I don't need. Like a different form of expressionism. And I have to say, slightly cynical about it. But I also started to understand what Gedi Sibony was attempting to deal with, and what he meant by emotion. And listening to him, I actually started to see in the work that he was trying to invent a different language, find different form, identified for himself a language that would allow him to, I would say, go through his work, or simply go through life. I also remember at the time that during our first meeting, he told me he was coming from the field of semiotic, which is the study of sign and symbol as a mean of language and communication. And that, for me, was very important, that actually these works, whatever I thought it was, started were the beginning of an alphabet, wherever the alphabet would take you. Then few weeks ago, I'll give you some stories, some anecdote with the artist. I was in the studio, and I was looking at I was looking at that. I go back to the horrendous image that I just show. I was looking at this. I was in the studio, and at the Gedi studio, and I was actually looking at the work, which is the one up in the corner, touching the ceiling, and another one, which is the table on the lower left side of the image. And I thought, well, they are perfectly fine sculpture, Gedi. I think they're great. And then Gedi was like, not so sure. I was like, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, I think they are curatorial trap. They works for curators. I was like, thank you. I fall in the trap. It was like, yeah, I think if I work this direction, I'm gonna end up being caught making art. I was like, well, fine, but isn't it what you're supposed to do? It was like, I'm gonna get caught being art that looks like art. Art that is not changing the language of what we understand as art. And this very specific statement, or these words for me still resonate. And maybe because of the context where we are. I think when I listen Gedi Sibony say that, I try to put it in the context of what's happened over the last, let's say 20 years of art making. Can you see this image clearly? It's Andy Warhol drowning in a can of tomato sauce. I kind of think that in many ways, the field of visual art has been here too long. The language, the aesthetic, that whether it's Richard Hamilton or Andy Warhol has invented, the pop aesthetic, this idea of recycling an existing language rather than inventing an existing language, has somehow dominated the conversation. And I think when I see someone like Gedi Sibony, his generation, I also see someone who's going to position himself not necessarily against Warhol as Warhol, because Warhol, I think, is a fantastic artist, but maybe the ripple effect of Warhol. And again, I think, I have nothing against this gentleman, the one on the right, Damien Hirst. I think he's done an incredible thing, but I also think that he is the end of something in terms of the way art stands right now. There is something else to be done. And I'm not talking market stuff. I'm talking about how do we represent ourselves in a culture, and what are the tools, the visual tools that are available to us to do that. And I think Damien somehow is a fantastic, blah, 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 artist entrepreneur. That's the end of something. It's actually fascinating to me that if we look at our recent history, September 15, Lehman Brothers collapse, Damien Hirst did his auction. I think for me, in terms of how do we represent ourselves in a culture, this is two bookends towards the end. A system of economical representation has changed, a system, and Damien Hirst the same day auctioned the 20th century. No, thank God he did it, because we can start working again. We can start identifying new ways, new mode of representing ourselves. It has nothing to do with the Big Bang. So that's where I started to understand what Gedi was doing. I have another example here, but I'm going to be 3 hours, so I'm going to pass it. I was willing to talk about the Bible. After the Big Bang, maybe it's a tangent that the artist wouldn't embrace. So let's go back to the studio. And I go back to the statement that Gedi did about if I keep working this way, I'm going to get caught in making art. And I was like, okay, for me, it's an interesting statement. It actually fascinates me. It's the first time I heard an artist saying that, and maybe I have not been listening hard enough. And then a few weeks ago, I was talking with Robert Ryman, and Robert Ryman was asking him also, how do you go through the day, through the studio? And he was talking about his painting, and he told me something which, again, was kind of strangely echoing what Gedi was saying. He told me, well, from time to time, a painting ends up being art. I was like, well, what do you mean? He was like, well, there is a lot of painting. Not all the painting going to be art. I mean, like art is a little bit, above, the category of painting, it's fine, it's painting, but there is something else that raises the bar, something else that changes the way you see the world. That's what is art. And even the Ryman was saying me, even all my painting, I think, I have a pretty good career, but not all of my painting qualified, in my eyes, to be art. And that, for me, is exactly this question, what does qualify to be art today, is a question that Gedi Sibony is asking. And there is, it's not only Gedi, it just happened to be here, but there's not a lot. That's a question that that is a key question when we look at art today. Well, is that an interesting question? I don't know. Again, we'll see. We'll see that at the end. At the end. So let's go back to Gedi a little bit. So what constitutes a Gedi Sibony's work? First, the material. If you look at what Gedi is doing, it's, for me, on one hand, very provocative, and on the other hand, actually quite classical. He's using leftovers. He's using waste. He's using, materials or objects with no qualities. I call that the insurance office aesthetic. It's like plain. It's not even noble material which is recycled. It's, bad second-hand carpet, cardboard. I think I have example, carpet. I tried to do a taxonomy of Gedi Sibony's work. I got very into it. Might be boring. So carpet, plastic bag hanging. You see the bag, it's a little bit something like that, but on the wall, way more successful than that. Like piece of cardboard, painted cardboard, sheets of plastic, and I think this work is hanging in the next room with duct tape. Cardboard, again, freestanding in the old tradition of that rondboss when you go to art history. That one for me is almost Mannerist, early 17th century Mannerist sculpture. Pegboard, sticks, wood sticks glued together. That would be fabric, old fabric, wrinkled. Disgraced Venetian blinds. Found wood frame with the image turned towards the wall. And found object, and we'll go back to this one, pedestal that become part of the exhibition. So far, actually, to be very honest, there is nothing really unusual about that. There is an history, entire 20th century. You can go back to Schwitters. You can go back to Arte Povera. There is, what they share eventually is a defiance towards, consumption, the culture of waste that eventually the 20th century has experienced, a culture of deadly overabundance. But what makes, for me, Gedi more specific is actually the way he processes the material rather than the material itself. The way he put his hand on it. And there is different kind of material here. There is material and object that bear absolutely no intervention. Gedi's work doesn't put his hand on it. It is like pure, pure ready-made, like this pedestal that you have here. Actually, the story behind this pedestal was he was doing an exhibition, I think it was in St. Gallen. He enters the space to install his work. The show before was barely installed. These pedestals were still there. Again, he said, well, they belong to the other exhibition. Don't touch them. Leave them in the space. They belong to my exhibition. So in this form of pragmatism. There is objects that were like subject to other people intervention. You know, this piece, for example, they're very ambiguous subject because, you know, when you look at them, they actually, you know, they look like they're composed, abstractly composed, that the artist actually made decision, you know, is the author of this object? No, he found it. I think, like on the first floor of the building where his studio is, where there is like a carpenter, and they cut piece of wood in this big, I don't know what you call that, piece of card or plywood. So that's a leftover, nothing to do there. Or object that actually the artist, so that other people, no decision from Gedi, decision from Gedi from other people than Gedi in the other piece, and objects that are you know, subjected to Gedi's own making, his own authorial. You say authorial when you're the author. He's the author of that, finding frames, framed work in a flea market, and just turning around the image inside and flipping it so that the image is facing the wall inside the frame. It's kind of a strange take on, I would say, on erased de Kooning. So there is the object. I'm trying to be methodical here. And then, for me, these objects, and if you look at them, you'll see that if you look at different Gedi Sibony exhibitions, what's fascinating to me, and if you don't have seen many Gedi's show, you start to realize that they repeat each other, that there is actually a very precise language that Gedi has invented. You know, for me, they're like letters. So if you want to make a sentence, or the words, then you're going to need you need a grammar. You're going to need a little bit more than only words. Where am I going with that? And I just want to show you in exhibition all these objects start to reappear under different different configuration. So you have the planks. I'm going to have a series of planks. One plank, which is in the other room. Another, that's the same. So my case is going down, because actually it's the same. Well, you have another series of planks, you know, again, installed in different configuration. Another one. And that for me, I mean, I know, maybe I'm just obsessive, but I start to be very fascinated by the way this form start to repeat in his work. Other ones. Then you have what I consider that a plank too. Cardboard, painted cardboard, like the one on the wall. Another one. Then you have what I call the excavated planks. We have one here, another one. And all of those, Gedi has absolutely nothing to do with them. They're found. Everything that looks like, you know, some kind of early Ellsworth Kelly here, no, nothing. It's done by a machine in a basement on an island in front of Manhattan. Same here. The same one, sorry. Other planks from, like, no, there is the sticks. Or am I with the plastic bag? Plastic bag, so black plastic bag. You have one hanging on a U-shaped thing, another one hanging in the corner there, with kind of stars coming out of it. The U-shaped, here, you're going to see it over and over again in the work. Another one here. Another one here. And I started to be very fascinated, like, that's why I started to think, well, it's not random. That's why the children I do not have cannot do it, for a very good reason, because I don't have them. Again here. And I'm convinced that in Gedi's mind, all these shapes actually play a very specific role, and a role that is not going to share with us. Because the goal, I think, also of the exercise with Gedi is actually to get you, and we'll talk about that later, to get you look a little harder. Carpet, another carpet, actually I thought it was carpet because I didn't see the show. Mistake, that's paper. And Another carpet, which is hanging just behind the frame. That's almost a Joseph Kossuth installation. Would be like 1 and 2 carpets. Another carpet. Okay, getting redundant. Huh? Another carpet. Pegboard. I call that the light. I have a name for that. The light obturator devices. For me, it's very close to Matisse when Matisse was in Morocco. And when he was fascinated with the North African architecture screening the light. I know when I was at the Walker Art Center, we bought a piece, and I explained that to the board, and I'm not sure they believed me. But then I realized that in the book, there is actually a reproduction of a Matisse. Huh? Another light obturator. Detail. Like a good art historian, you have the real thing, and you have the detail of the painting. Then you have like the sticks. You see, you don't have any stick, Anthony, in your show. Uh-huh. That you see over and over again. That was at the Whitney Biennial. And then I have a name for that. Yeah, like the freestanding cardboard pieces. Well, you get it. There is a language. I'm going to move forward with that because I can spend hours looking at that. Again, I'm trying to figure out. I'm going to give you just example of these different elements of vocabulary. Again, plastic. You get it. He has a language. I call that the stuttering piece because they kind of repeat each other. It's like a pun. Like twins. And again, then you have one in the show, these things that just repeat themselves or like just echo something in the room that was not in the work, but is in the room, and Gedi, you just want to frame it with his own works. That's here, that's the one here, huh? the twin. And of course, I talked about that, the part of the vocabulary, all these found frames, and he obliterates by turning the image inside out, which is also for me a very radical move in his work, as if the work would be there as placeholder for the space, and that if there is an image, then you don't have a conversation anymore because the image is going to tell you the truth or a specific truth about something. Gedi doesn't want that. You have to enter the work with your own, I think, with your own content. I have a section. That's where we are. That's what I think Gedi is doing. It's a chart. What I just showed you, it was excruciating for everybody, but what I just showed you was that what Gedi is doing right now with his object is identifying these letters, this word, this vocabulary. And the next step for him is going to be to find a syntax, or to make this thing works together. And the syntax, you say syntax in English? Yeah. Syntax in English is the space where the work exists. And here I would like Gedi to have a system, because that would help me to understand better, and then it would be easier to talk about it. And this is what I wish Gedi would have written about the work and the way to display the work, which I'm sure maybe you would have liked it or not, I don't know. But that's what I would like Gedi to tell us. And I'm going to read it because I sweat on it. All these forms work and fit together in various determinate ways. They have various properties, various functions, and assume various relations to one another according to the configuration of the space. They combine with one another according to their inherent properties. Each form, internal qualities and properties determine the possibilities of its combination with other objects. Each combination constitutes a specific proposition. Each proposition is a model of reality. That would be perfect. That would be easy. That would be systematic. That would be methodologically correct for a curator. But unfortunately, it doesn't work this way. It doesn't work this way because, first, because I think it's way too philosophical. And I don't read, I mean, kind of philosophical. I want to pat myself in the back. For me, when I think about that, and when I think about Gedi, I think from time to time, Ludwig Wittgenstein. You know, if we believe that through the Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, Wittgenstein provided a system, a logic which aimed would be to analyze the world through words, then I would like to think that Gedi Sibony is giving a system through which we can analyze the world through forms. But I'm not a philosopher. I read philosophy the same way I go to the gym, and I'm not an athlete, just to keep my mind working a little bit. And if Gedi would have written that, it would be, again, way too systematic. Everything in his exhibition would look the same. We're not facing a philosopher here. We're facing an artist. We're facing someone who work, and more maybe Gedi, more specifically than other artists, with intuition, with something which is a phenomenological intuition, which is the understanding of space. And I can give you an example of how he works. When I did the project with him at the Whitney Biennial, knowing the work a little bit, I was thinking, oh, it's going to be easy. It's going to take it's going to come in 3 days, it's done. It's a piece of carpet on the floor, plank on the wall, you in, you out, we're done, we can move to the next one. 3 weeks. 3 weeks with Gedi Sibony. And Gedi was telling me, well, you don't understand the way I work. I don't put my thing in the space. What he was doing, he was like, every day was driving absolutely everybody crazy, going the entire Whitney Museum, looking at the way my co-curator, Chrissy Iles, and I were installing. And then he was trying to copy us with his own stuff. I was like, well, Gedi, why don't you do your work? I do my work. And no, look, well, there's not so much curatorial work in the job in the world, so stay where you are. But it was a way for him to be like a sponge, to understand the space, the context he was acting in, and make sure that his work would actually be porous to the context he was inhabiting. I don't know how he worked here and how he reacted to the space, but what you told me with the previous installation and how he recycled some of the panel against the window was, for me, the same spirit. There is a level of improvisation and understanding of space, or what Bachelard would have called the poetic of space, but it's way beyond what we understand as something like, it's nothing to do with Euclidean geometry. Okay, so I was thinking Wittgenstein. Go back a little bit. And I was thinking, okay, I'm going to call Gedi because I don't want to go on a tangent that is not going to be happy with, because I know it's recorded, and then I'm going to be in trouble. I did it once when we talked about that this afternoon, when I was talking to Gedi about Richard Tuttle, didn't like Richard Tuttle, we got into a fight. I don't want to start that over again. I know I know why, but so, as we say in French, only the stupid one do the same mistake twice. So I'm not going to do that. So I called him and said, well, Gedi, what about Wittgenstein? What do you think about Wittgenstein and his relationship to language? He was like, well, it was yesterday, and I'm not lying. He told me, well, that's funny you're calling me today to ask me about Wittgenstein, because actually this morning I was flipping through Wittgenstein book, and this sentence from Wittgenstein stayed in my mind, and he read it to me and said, our rules leave loopholes open. It makes sense? Our rules leave loopholes open. I can't say I really understand where he was going with that, but I know what I can make out of that without his authorization. I think so I know I look at his work and the exhibition space, and I think the exhibition space is, for Gedi, the metaphor for the larger world. When you experience an installation by Gedi Sibony, the space around you, for me at least, the space around me, okay, the space between the object is, for me, as important as the object themselves. I think the objects are just punctuation. I mean, you have like one example on the wall here, when you see this little mark. It's punctuation of space, the punctuation of an experience. This space, or the way he places his object in the space is the loophole of our rules, and is trying actually to identify in the way we go through space where our conventions are rigid, where are the loopholes of, for me, of our convention. Gedi's work for me is a very precise exercise in perception, the perception of space, the perception of systems, and the perception of convention. And perhaps this, okay, well, I'll say that again already. I think it's, again, when you go to this space, and Anthony, you were saying that this afternoon, it's not easy to achieve what he's doing. It requires an incredible amount of discipline and attention. It requires us to be alert. And again, if you take the work through at a metaphorical level, for me, Gedi's work is about this attention. It's not necessarily about whether there is a U-shaped piece of cardboard somewhere. It's about how you can actually go through the space and exercise your eyes, exercise your brain, because if you do that, the attention you bring to the space is the attention you should bring to language, to history, to relationship. Going back to this first image of the two carpet kissing. What is needed to make two carpets like that kiss together? How do you maintain this relationship? You maintain the relationship with attention. If a museum has this piece, not that one I sell it at the end for nothing, to maintain it, you need extreme attention. And you bring it to what Gedi was telling me about the kid, the third piece on the carpet. You maintain a relationship in your private life, in the world, through this high level of respect and attention. If you don't do that, we know what happened in the world. It's been happening for the last 8 years, a little less now, then thing falls apart. And I'm losing myself in myself again. And I went back to the interview that I had with Gedi, because then, for me, Gedi's work is an exercise in perception. And I went back to this interview we did together, and there is one thing in the book which defines what he does. He says, this is what I do, looking. And it's, again, that's where art starts. If I go back to my first question, the Big Bang, Richard Hamilton, art starts when we start looking. And I went back to looking, and I went back again to Wittgenstein, because I went back to my note when I was a student about Wittgenstein, and not in the Tractatus, but there is something, I think I remember, in philosophical investigation, when Wittgenstein say, the philosopher must look and see, and later in the same text he say, don't think, but look. And actually, there is something there about, and we lost that. When the kind of example that I show you about, whether it's Damien Hirst, or I think our culture, which is an hyper-visual culture, is contradictory because it's a visual culture. At the same time, we lost the time, we lost the capacity to stop, experience a space, and look at art. How many, there is statistic. People spent, when I was at the Walker, we did like this, we ask questions to audience. How long did they spend in the permanent collection? Permanent collection, 3 floors, I would say about 150 work, 15 minutes. So you do the math, how much time one person spent in front of a work of art, and what's our attention level. Okay, so I'm happy now. I broke Gedi Sibony code, not the Da Vinci code, but I broke it. I know he's a philosopher in hiding, and he's trying to help us to look with a very specific system. But again, that would be too easy because I'm missing something here. There is another element in Gedi Sibony's work, which is humor. I mean, when you look at the work, it's totally provocative. When you see, the piece of carpet, of course, it's about this relationship, but there is this kind of nonchalance, this humor. When you put a piece of carpet on the wall, there is a tongue-in-cheek quality. So I try to put, and then I'm gonna get very French here. I'm sorry. And I think this I always consider artists as not so much Homo sapiens. You say Homo sapiens? I consider artists as Homo ludens. Homo ludens is the Latin word for playful. And if there is one artist in the room tonight, who's not in the room because he's not here, who's an Homo ludens, that would be Gedi Sibony, because all what we see in his work is about this play with space, play with the language he has invented, playing tricks on us with the way he frames the space. And I know it's coming from language, and I was trying to think, where can I find, I have my crutches, arte povera, and so on and so forth. I'm going to pass that, it's arte povera, but we've talked too much already. But there is, for me, there is one person who did with word what Gedi Sibony, I think, is trying to do with stuff. And it's a French writer, Raymond Roussel. I don't know if you know Raymond Roussel, absolutely fabulous. His major work is Locus Solus, Impression of Africa. He was a recluse, very elegant. But all his work was about how can he, through language, totally reinvent the convention of narration, or to reinvent the way language can tell a story, and stories were very often very absurd, not less absurd than the stories that Gedi Sibony is not telling us because he asks us to invent the story that is framing in his own space. I will ask question at the end. And there is the playful quality, the dreamy quality that someone like Raymond Roussel had is totally in place with Gedi, not through words, but through the shape. I mean, Roussel was the king of alliteration, using words that looks a little bit alike but are very different. It's exactly what, tonight, it's exactly what Gedi Sibony is doing. But you have another example if you go, and Roussel was an absolute inspiration for Marcel Duchamp. Marcel Duchamp would not have existed without Raymond Roussel. All the methodology of Duchamp is coming from literature and the literature of Raymond Roussel. There is another artist totally inspired by Marcel Duchamp, thus Raymond Roussel, it's Bruce Nauman. You have, I'd never seen this drawing before, but I would encourage you to go next room. There is a drawing by Bruce Nauman called Love Me Tender. And then, Love Me Tender, like Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley, love me tender. And then he say like, then he start to play with that. L-O, then V-E-M, love me tender. Like trying all the configuration you can use with the same body of word. For me, it's coming from Roussel. It's exactly what, again, Gedi Sibony is doing with his forms. And then I went back to Raymond Roussel, and there is one thing that I think the latest book that Raymond Roussel wrote was How Did I Wrote Certain of My Books, where he actually explained his own methodology. And it's striking when you read this book and when you listen Gedi talking, that they're actually talking exactly the same language. And Raymond Roussel wrote in How Did I Wrote Certain of My Book that he said, I forced myself to write each of the story I wrote with the fewest possible words. And again, for me, it's exactly what Gedi is doing. The smallest common denominator of what art can be and when the moment art starts. It's very, okay. Well, Raymond Roussel, now that I'm talking about it, seems a little bit gratuitous and very personal, or maybe it's my own fascination, but it's also, I think, the quality of Gedi's work. You enter the work and you're going to start projecting in the space that he has framed your own interpretation of the space. And that, for me, is incredibly important. I was saying that Gedi's installation, for me, are not installation, they are not statement, they are proposition, they are conversation. If you're a conversation, that's why there is no image in his work. If there is image or proposition, you don't have a conversation. When you enter the space, you start a conversation with the space and with the object. Okay, now I feel better. I have my art historical crutches. I should be satisfied, and you should be. But still, I'm missing one element with Gedi. And that the element so we have the word, we have the language, we have the syntax, we have the humor. We kind of have, we have a program that very, very slowly start to be put in place. What I'm missing is, why is the program doing? Why is that interesting to even consider this program, to consider when these objects start to be art or not art? or is it interesting to reflect on a piece of the one I'm staring at, a piece of carpet hanging on the wall. And there is one other element that for me really constitute what Gedi Sibony does. It's this absolute openness. When I describe the way he works in entire space or an exhibition, and he take into consideration what is there is this way of working. Umberto Eco called it like the open artwork. It's like it's an open brain. He thinks like a sponge, with all his respect. He's open to every information coming at him. There is something very much Zen Buddhist about that. This idea that you don't make decision, the principle of non-intervention. And again, I don't know how installed here, but looking at him work, listening to of him talking, I'm not sure he would mention Zen Buddhism, but there is this absolute openness. And I look at I went back to the book and I talk about, sorry, I'm stupid. I like the dandy image here and the dandy image of this, what is called, can I say the way you call it? Called the elephant ass, because it looks like an elephant ass from the back, but there is ties on it. And there is also something for me in Gedi's work, which is the absolute dandy. To have the guts to put on, to use this blanket, to put this all tight, to do what he does all over. There is the absolute dandy. Like the idea, that's the Baudelairean idea of the dandy, that you don't need to do anything because everything is there. You just need to go through life, and life will be nice to you. There's no reason it shouldn't, if you're a nice person. And so I went back to his writing, and he was in the book that is here, and he said, there is few quotes for me that are very important. He said, first, I like to gather the unused. We got that. I like to follow the functional decision of others. We got that too. And finally, he said, I have a fantasy of walking through the world and finding what's already there right in front of me and putting it forward. And that's for me what I call this, this incredible openness. He goes through life and absorbs. And that's for me the core value of what Gedi Sibony does. And then I got another idea. I was like, well, I know one other person who was working this way during the 20th century. It's John Cage. John Cage methodology for music, to make noise and silent music, was based on this openness. Again, I'm a coward, not taking, unnecessary risk. I called Gedi. I said, well, Gedi, what do you think about John Cage? He was like, oh, come on, give me a break. I was like, well, I think I have a case here. He said, no, like the chance thing. I'm tired of the John Cage and my work being identified with chance. And I told him, well, I'm not interested in the chance thing here. I'm interested in again, the openness of John Cage. John Cage, and I went back to one text that John Cage, I think, wrote in 1928. And he was still in school, and it's amazing to see, like, so in high school. The text was called Other People Think. And the reason I went back to this text is because I also, and you will get it a little bit later, that when Gedi does all these things, when, for example, he turns an image towards the wall, he's silencing something else. He's silencing a convention. He's silencing a notion of the status quo. And I went back to this text by John Cage from 1928, again titled Other People Think. And this is what Cage proposed in his essay, in his text. He offered or request silence on the part of the United States in order that we could hear what other people think. And again, when you enter a Gedi Sibony room, you might not hear what people think, but at least you have the chance to maybe hear what you're thinking yourself. So I think John Cage will be my last crutches to open the Gedi Sibony Codex. But not, again, not the Cage of chance meeting, but the Cage who sought to replace a desire for mastery or control with an open-ended free play of ID. The Cage who understood silence as an anti-authoritative mode that was nonetheless not oppositional, revealing the power of the individual to construct meanings unauthorized by a dominant culture. The Cage whom for silence was seditious. The Cage whose most innovative musical concept was that music cannot be separated from all other sound, and who believed that music is a continuous presence in an environment and that only listening is intermittent. The Cage that said at the end of his life, art is everywhere. It is only seeing which stops now and then. And I actually think that exactly when Gedi said, I want to go through the work and identify things, I think it's already there. I think the methodology is very similar. And then I started to, I'm going to move from this image, I started to look, to go back to John Cage. And I actually didn't know that. This is, I think, one of the last John Cage pieces. John Cage was commissioned a film in Germany in, well, he died in 1992, so it might be before 1992. And the film was nothing. It was just Cage capturing light and shadow in a space with a camera. And again, enter Gedi Sibony space, and you see our light and shadow play on the work. Look at this wall here. That's where I was putting this work. You know, the way Gedi Sibony created this punctuation in the space, which are very similar, that are echoing what John Cage was trying to do. When I go through Gedi's work, beyond all the shenanigan I just told you, the reason I find it so appealing and so different is that it makes me look at the world differently. Thank you.